Hi, this is Laurie from Interior Design Community and our podcast To the Trade with Nile. Hi, Nile.
Hi.
So great to be back. I'm so excited to chat with you because we have a really, really amazing topic today. We're going to be talking about the interior designer's investment, the emotional investment that interior designers have in every project, and how we want to convey, like, this is like an open love letter to clients on how designers feel about a project and what that communication style looks like, because we want to really like talk about how much designers care about every single aspect of design and how it like literally it's in there, it's in the soul.
Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Can't turn
So
it off.
yeah, you can't turn it off. You can't turn it off.
Right.
And so I was really kind of thinking about, actually I was probably talking to my husband about this a while ago. And I think we were just talking about in general, like design and how much it can mean to a client to have a well-designed house. Like, just like, think about it from a perspective, somebody who has a need in their home. Like, they are busy family with 4 kids and they have an entryway that's always getting messed up, and they're disorganized, and kids' rooms are, a mess all the time, and they're both working family. Like, how little things about design can help them live happier lives. And this is something that I've even been thinking about in a broader scale with meetings with the people that do this neuroaesthetics and design and
Hmm.
and science, and how that works together, and how our brains perceive design, and how I think all of you designers really innately have that, like, in you.
Yep.
Like, like, if something is off, you can go into, like, I'm sure you've done it in a million, like, Airbnbs, hotel rooms, lobbies, restaurants. You're like, this is wrong. It's
Yep.
like a gut, right? Like,
Yep.
it's that
Yep.
gut feeling of like, this is, if this was over here and this was over here, this space is not. And it's like, it's almost like a form of autism. I think, you know what I mean? Like, it's like that this isn't right and it's driving you crazy and you can't even function.
Yep.
So I've been with designers who are like, they're literally like free to, form where the couch and the coffee table are at an
Oh
Airbnb.
yeah.
They can't live
Yeah.
like that. They can't, they
Yeah.
might put it back at the end, but while they're in
Just
that
moving
space,
thing. Yeah. Yeah.
you have to move everything around so that
Yeah.
it's
Because it just doesn't make sense.
doesn't
Yeah.
make sense.
And it
And
could be a little tweak, like, oh, why is the coffee table, 3 inches this way instead of, 3 inches this way, or this doesn't really make sense.
right,
It could be little things.
right. Or
Yeah.
why are the
Yeah.
mugs and everything in this cabinet when they should
Yeah.
be over here in this cabinet near the coffee maker? Like, things
Yeah,
that
I
don't
was
make
just in Vegas, and well, this wasn't not just, but this was last year in Vegas in September. I remember thinking, okay, who's space planned this room? They weren't thinking clearly, because you cannot see the television from both the sofa and the bed, and that's the rule of thumb, especially in a room like this. You got to see that if there's one television, you should be able to see it from the bed and the sofa. They weren't thinking because there was like a recess, and I'm like, now your half of your picture is cut off. And I just thinking to myself, this was not space planned. This was like a quick and dirty job. This was not done right,
I
you
know.
know.
I've even been to some upscale hotels. I remember going to an upscale hotel in Maine, and the faucet was just like a little short. So every time you wash your hands, like, the water is all over the
Yep.
countertop, and you're like,
Yep.
oh, this is
That's
driving me
frustrating.
crazy. Like, why did they just pick a faucet that actually goes more towards the center of the sink so that there's not a splashed mess everywhere?
Yeah.
I just like these little thoughtful things. I think that designers, even sometimes, you can't be perfect. You make these selections thinking about every little inch, every little detail, but sometimes even designers can make mistakes, but it kills a designer to make a mistake like that. It's like this emotional thing. And I thought it would be an interesting podcast to explore this thing that's inside designers. Niall, I remember telling you that I don't think there's any other profession where a the person who's selling the product, or and selling the service, would pay just because they wanted something to look the way it needed to look. Like, if I
Yeah.
went in to get like hair extensions and I wanted color, whatever, that hairstylist is not going to be like, you know what, you looking at your face, you have to have the real human hair extensions that are this long and have to be colored this way. And it's going to take, you know, 20 hours to do your hair the way it needs to be done, or 18 hours, whatever it might be. I know that that's a lot of money, so I'm just gonna charge you for 5 hours and I'm gonna just eat the rest because it just needs to look like that. It just needs to,
Yep.
or
No,
a
that's not
plastic
happening.
surgeon or whatever. Your body needs to look like that. So I'm gonna just give you that. No, no,
That's not happening. No,
that's
that's
not
never gonna
happening.
happen. Never gonna happen.
No, and in so many creative fields, that's the way it is. But I know so many interior designers, and you can tell me if you're listening at home or wherever you are. Have you ever bought something for a client because it absolutely had to be there? Even if you brought it home, like your styling is shot. Are you buying and you kept it? You didn't return it. Like you kept, like you bought the Le Creuset, pots, and you bought the flowers, and you bought the cutting boards and all of the staging stuff. And then you didn't use it again, but you kept it and you tried to sell it to the client. They maybe didn't. Like, how much of this stuff are you buying just so that you can make sure
Yep.
that you're translating what it needs to look like in pictures? Because
Mhm.
that to me is like that's where it is. It's like that finished picture is what you're selling your services as. So you care so much.
And yeah, and truthfully, I've said, it's why the project that you're working on in the moment is why you have that project, right? Because that client called you because of a picture they saw. And
Right,
so here you are trying to, recreate or create the same level of art that they saw so that the next potential client will call you based on that. And so it's
it's a
yeah,
big
it's
game, right? Like you
exactly.
have
Yeah,
to do
yeah, yeah,
it.
yeah. Yeah, yeah,
And so
yeah.
you're willing to do a lot of things in order for that to take place. And we were talking numerous times about what are those things, and some of it is like, now you've shared with me, like you have for sure shaved off hours.
Oh gosh. And I've shaved off hours. I've realized that things needed to move a little bit quicker, even though, my process, the way I think creatively, I'm like, well, I still need to really invest. If I move quicker, it's not going to turn out right. So what do? I need a project manager, but I can't bill them for a project manager because I didn't bill them from the beginning. And so I will eat the cost
Right.
and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars for
Dollars later.
for two projects simultaneously, right? At the same time. And never once billed, you know, one project I did have to bill for because that one they had a contractor that we were not handling the contracting, and then the mid project they asked us to take it over. So that was an easier sell on our project management, right? Because the scope changed. But the
Right.
other two, when I brought the project manager on, that was a hard sell for me. So I thought. I thought it would be a hard sell. And so I just ate the cost because I cared genuinely about the project. I've
Right.
told clients before, I really shouldn't want this more than you, but I do. I feel like I do want this more than you,
Ah,
and that's typically what happens.
that's a
I think
huge
we're
statement what
all
you
out of,
just said. I
yeah.
want to like highlight that. Like, how many of you out there feel like you care more than the client about this project? Like, how many of you are in that moment where you're working on this project every day and like you're up at night because you're like, oh my gosh, this has to get laid out properly, and this is
Hmm.
coming in and that is coming in. You're obsessing. They're sleeping. They're not paying attention. They're not up all night because they're worried about that. And to be fair, some of that's the job, right? Some of
Yeah.
that's the job, but I think, if you ask me, I think that most designers would say they care more about it,
Oh
every
yeah.
project, than the client. Don't you
Oh
think?
yeah. I would say I think that number is north of 99%. It's almost like I remember my project manager one time when we were setting up a new project and we were sort of going over the timeline, and the client was giving a lot of pushback to, well, why does it take this amount of, why is the process like this? And how come he needs this amount of time for design? And I don't understand. And finally, I remember my project manager said, can I just say to you, that all the things that we have laid out here for in terms of the timeline, and it's all for your good. We're doing all of this for you. Like none of this stuff, in terms of timeline, in terms of how the creative time Nile needs, in terms of, everything. Like none of this is for us. Everything that we're doing is for the greater good of the project, which is for you. We want the best possible outcome for you. So we only insist upon these things because we know it's the best way to execute your project. That's how we know we're going to give you the best results. And I think sometimes that point gets lost. Like, I'm only doing this because I want to give you the absolute best.
Right.
I want you to have the absolute best.
Right.
So, yeah, yeah.
I
I think
do
that gets
think I will
lost.
caveat that I do think there's a mix. You do want to give the clients the absolute best, but
Perfectionism.
you also, I think designers themselves know that that product is also their work, so um it's their
Mm.
ticket to new work. It's their it's like a painting, if you think about the painting, it represents them. So if it doesn't look good, they're thinking of their colleagues, you know, I know tons of designers who haven't put projects up on their website because they just weren't proud of the project,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
because so partly it's for the client, and the most of it is for the client. We want them to have the home of their dreams. We want the scope of the product to have been met and exceeded in every project. But I think that there's also a little bit of that is ego. Like I want that project to be beautiful because that's part of my portfolio.
Oh, well,
You
so
know,
I don't think they're mutually exclusive.
they're not. They're
I don't
not.
think they're mutually
They're
exclusive.
not.
I think, you hired me, and it's like, I think it's like how, what, I think it was Sean Lowe that gave that analogy of the Mercedes, right? You cannot buy it without leather seats, point blank, period. If
Right.
you want the Mercedes, you get leather seats. You hired me to do the design. And this is the level of work that I want to
Do.
execute. You right
Right.
from the rooter to the tutor. So I cannot give you anything less than that.
Right.
And so I agree with you. Like, yeah, my ego is all up in that. And at the same time, you get a really great space because I care about that too. Like I care about how walk in the door and where you put your keys and where what the work triangle looks like in the kitchen and where the dog bed is. I care about all those things. But I also care about how those things look in the photo and how
Yeah.
those things photograph, right? Those things are
And
sort
to
of,
be
they go
fair,
together.
designers will move your stuff, clients out
Oh
there.
yeah.
They'll
Oh
move,
yeah.
they have no problem. Like I've been on plenty of photo shoots, take a photo of it, take out all your personal stuff, put in
Yeah.
their stuff to make it look
Yeah.
magazine
Oh
worthy.
yeah.
And that happens on every project, whether or not it's photographing for the designer or whether if it was photographing for a magazine. If you're going to have a party, you don't leave all your stuff out there. You know what I mean?
Mm-mm.
Like you're not leaving your underwear
Yeah.
on the floor
No.
when you're having friends over. It's the same kind of thing. Designers have to make it look as beautiful as it can look
You're
because other
staging
people are
it.
going to be looking
Yeah.
at it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
They're going to be judged based on it. You're, as the client, are not going to be judged on the your home at that level as the designer would be if in those areas.
Right.
Designer putting on their website, that's to get another client or a magazine looking at it or whatever those might be. But it would be wonderful. I think that's one thing that we hear over and over again in interior design community is like, I've asked, what do you wish clients would know about, like, if you could, wave a magic wand and you could say, like, you walk into any new project, any new prospect, what would you wish that all Americans, all people in the world knew immediately about interior design the second you walked in the door,
I
instead of
would
having to teach them?
So I would probably say, and I used to do this, I would say, and every single client said the same thing, that they had no idea. They had no idea the amount of work that went into the project. And I used to bring, because before clients didn't understand. So then I said, you know what? I'm going to bring every client along. I'm going to bring them to my house when I was working, solely from my house. And then when I moved into an office, I'm going to bring them to the office for selections. And they would be with me. It would be all day. It would be like 8, 9 hours. And they would like literally, I remember one client was on the floor in my office and like her fur coat's on the floor. Her eyes were glazed over. She was like, Nile, I can't anymore. Like she came in like giddy as a schoolgirl. And then like 8 hours in, she was like, Nile, I think you've got my aesthetic down. I have to go. She's like, I had no idea. And we were only doing her dining room. I had no idea this was so much work. She's like, because I said, now, what do you think about? I said, how do you want to handle the window treatments? Do you want to like the edging on she's like, I can't anymore. I have to go. I did not know it was this much detail. So I really wish that they knew the level of work and the level of detail that we invest
Right.
into each project. It's
Right.
a lot of work,
It's
you
so many
know.
micro decisions.
Oh
And
yeah.
that was decision fatigue that she had. She couldn't
Yeah.
see straight anymore because that was decision fatigue. And that's like a muscle we build in your brain to be able to handle that level of decision making on a daily basis.
Yeah.
There's so many decisions to be made about every little aspect of every little piece of furniture and every little piece of, equipment you're specifying. An entire house, you're doing an entire house. Think of how many SKUs that is. And
It's
that would be
hundreds.
thousands, I would
Hundreds.
think. Thousands. I mean, think of each individual
True.
part.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's true. Yeah, you probably are in the thousands if you're doing a whole house. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
would think so. I mean, it's if every single little piece, like you're talking like, if even just like the pieces on hardware in the cabinetry, like how many pieces that is, just in hardware. And
True. True.
that's just one room. Like if you have another room and another room, and then you've got, you know, all these different moving parts, and people they think about the big things, like where are you going to put the sofa, the pillows, the coffee table. They don't think about the millions of little
I mean, there's so much. I had a call yesterday. It was supposed to be a 15-minute call just to sort of like it turned into 50 minutes because there were so many details that we hadn't thought about. And it wasn't like I was talking to another professional. So it wasn't like I was talking to a client and I
right,
had to explain a lot of stuff. We could talk in layman's terms, but there was just we had to flesh out so many different details and say, oh, what about this? Or what if we did this? Or what if it something that was supposed to be 15 minutes turned into almost an hour
right,
because we were addressing all the different details around the space.
right.
So, I mean,
And that's
I
the tough
just,
part because what
yeah.
you're doing, like at the end of that, are you going back to your invoice and saying, okay, I spent 50 minutes talking on that phone call, or I'm going to say I've spent 15 minutes, which I had budgeted? I'm curious. What would you do? What are you doing?
Well, so, I don't charge hourly.
Yep,
I charge flat.
flat,
But if I were tracking my time just for grins, just to understand,
which
I
you
would definitely,
should.
I would go back and say, it was supposed to be 15 and I spent an hour. If I'm
Yeah,
being honest, if I was tracking hourly and I'd only budgeted for 15, I probably would go back and only put 15
yeah,
and only put
yeah,
because I think a lot of times what happens with designers, and I don't think I don't think we do this because I know that there's some type A executive out there in an office saying, yeah, see, because they're not good business people. No, we don't do it because we're not good business people. We do it because we feel like charging, I'm not saying it's right, but charging the extra amount is going to take away from the room
right,
because we've seen it happen
right.
where charging hourly, that invoice, clients will say, "Oh, I didn't know."
Now I'm
Well,
not going to buy that light. Now I'm
yeah,
not
let's
going to do
stop.
that. Yeah,
Let's stop. You know what? Let's forget it. Let's stop doing the library. Don't worry about the built-ins. Don't worry about the accessorizing. I'll just pay you your invoice and we'll just be done. And so
right,
the room doesn't get finished, and like you said, we sign up for the project to execute a great room for a client, but we also sign up for it for ourselves because we get something from it too, right? It's fulfilling for us too.
Right.
So,
It's your art. It's
we want to see it through to the end. Yeah.
sure, sure. Can you
Yeah.
imagine the literal pain in your soul to like walk out? And this happens for so many designers to walk out of that project because of conflict or because of finances or because of whatever, and it wasn't done.
Been
It's like
there.
walking
Yeah.
out of a movie that had like a suspenseful ending and you just didn't get to the end. I mean, like that's crazy. It makes you like it doesn't
Been there. Been
Yes,
there. Done that.
yes, right. I mean, I remember talking to a designer who I adore who she just wanted to go on a vacation and she went on her vacation fully planned well ahead of time with a client. Project was in the midst of working, but she's going on vacation with her husband, comes back. Now there was some contentious feelings with the contractor. The contractor was a friend of the client, not really hired by the designer. While she was gone on vacation, the contractor was pretty much like, you don't really need this designer, from what I gather. And during the time she had a punch list of different things that this contractor needed to do in one of the homes. There was another home that they were working on, and he like thought like she's just being nitpicky about these things. They're friends. So basically she came back to the job. I mean, like this is 2 years of her life. She has been working on this project. They're going to be, you know, incredibly photographable. Like she's going to be able to, have this in magazines. And this is the end. This is towards the end of at least one of the houses is finished. It just needs the
Yeah.
punch list done.
Yeah.
She comes back. They want to discontinue working with her. She doesn't get to go in and take any pictures. She doesn't get to see if the punch list happened. She doesn't get any photographs. It's just, you two aren't getting along. This is our friend. We don't feel like we can continue with you. Pretty much is what happened. Sorry, we've appreciated your work, and it just fell apart while she was away. And you would think that that would never in a million years happen. It's such a financial uh, burden really for a client to do that, because now they've got to have someone else pick up the pieces in the next product that doesn't really know the recipe, that the designer was working on, the design plan. And it's such a risk for them to have done that, but they had their friend advising them, and that kind of thing happens all the time. Or they come back in a lesser scale and something has big time changed because you're like they've done their own design a little bit, they've added in their own art and or their own whatever, and they're having like a hard time getting photographs that way. So
Yeah.
I just listen to the, part of interior design community that people don't realize is that what you see is the memes and the questions of the day and the fun stories and the deal breakers that we do, but a lot goes on in DMs for me. I get questions that never see the light of day, or just like designers coming to me and asking me for advice about who they should talk to for this, or how they should handle this problem. And I spend hours talking to designers every day for 11 years. And so I know a lot about what designers have been through. And sometimes it's like tears at, because they found out something terrible has happened and they don't know how to handle it for the client, or the client, and sometimes it's not their fault. And it is just, there's just things that kind of go on. And you think like, how can we educate? How can we work better to educate the public about what interior design is, what it does, how long it takes, and really how much a designer is your friend in this process. They're not, I think people have this perception that design is like someone trying to, you know, I do like be super fancy, and
Mhm.
like it's an exclusive thing, and that they're just gonna just try to upsell me everything, and I'm not gonna, I'm just gonna be constantly paying bills, paying bills, paying bills,
Yeah, I think like people say, and I think people are, I think there's this thing, because I know I had it when I graduated. I was like, I'm going to be the designer for everybody. I'm going to be able to help everybody. I'm going to work with everybody, because everybody should be able to have a designer. It should be something that's accessible and attainable for everybody. And that's a great ideal to have, but that's not necessarily true. right?
Right.
And it's not about money. It's really about mindset. You know, can you really handle partnering with a designer? Are you really there? Because I've had clients that have had tons of money and they just could not handle it.
Right.
They just couldn't, they were not equipped. They thought they could, but they couldn't. And then I've had clients who didn't have a ton of money and they were great, wonderful clients, you know. I think it starts with really accepting that design is a luxury. It's a
Right.
service. It is a luxury, and that's okay.
Right.
That is really okay.
And I think there's
It's
a little bit of control in there too, that like a letting go of control
well,
when
that's
you
the
are
thing.
an
Control.
artist or
That's the thing. Control is well. So that's the thing with you get into this thing with the client, and control should just not even be on the table because it's debilitating. What you want is ownership, and you want to make sure that like the your client has some ownership in the project, and that you have ownership, and so you want shared ownership. I found that if you can offer sort of like experiences where the client feels that there's some ownership for them, that they're participating in a way, especially if you ask the question, how involved do they want to be? And they want to be involved. So then you're giving them, areas where they can sort of make decisions, and sort of guide the project in certain ways, right? That usually helps.
right. Let's
I
buy-in
found.
because at the end
Yeah.
they feel like they help design. They
Yeah.
help the design go forward. So
Yeah.
they're going to like it more. Anybody who
Yeah.
buys in is going to that's a sales tactic too, just so designers are aware too that are listening, like thinking about old school sales tactics in this, not manipulative like stuff, but like just like how the sales process works, how we move sales forward, how we close deals. Buy-in is a very powerful sales tactic. So getting designers, because I know designers are artists, but they are also salespeople. They just
Yeah.
are.
Yeah.
And
And guess what? And that's the other thing too, realizing that because I told myself I wasn't
right,
for years. And that was the biggest issue I had. I had to overcome that hurdle. I'm not a salesperson. I am a designer. I'm a creative. I don't sell. And so therefore that was a huge hurdle for myself.
well, you don't necessarily need, you know, you don't need
But
to
I
be
am. But I
amazing,
am.
like, but you do. You're
But
right.
I am because the
You are.
problem was I didn't realize that there were two types of clients. I had a great client and I also had great buyers. And I was trying to make my buyers full service clients and not realizing that some people just want to come along and buy pieces of furniture. And that's great. That's where like all, things like all mine come into play. Hey,
Right,
I understand. Shop this mood board and go, right?
right,
They're not full service. And that's why the relationship goes like this, and you can't get the photographs, and the room goes to crap because it's not because they never wanted that to begin with. But they
right,
felt they had to say they wanted it in order to get the pieces that they wanted, right?
right,
Because they can't go to Pottery Barn and put it all together, right?
right,
So figuring out, oh, you know what they're not my, perfect client. They're my perfect buyer. I need to send them down this avenue and
right,
wait for my perfect client to come along. But that
right,
was something that I never got because I was telling myself, I'm not a salesperson. I'm a designer.
right,
That's all I do is design. So
right.
you're right. We're salespeople. And I think I know I did. I completely let that go. I was like, I'm not that.
Yeah, I think it's difficult. Like so I have a sales background before I came into this industry. I was in sales, and
Yeah.
my very first job was at Charles Schwab, and I had to go through 6 weeks of sales training. So I learned a lot about, the old school sales tactics of how to close, like
Yeah.
mirroring a client. And if a client has certain, mannerisms or words, you use that same word because then they'll feel comfortable with you and you can mirror them. And, or how you shouldn't say no. You should always say yes and blah, 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 like, because that just subconsciously gets them into a no mindset, and how you talk to a client versus like, hey, I'd like to have a few minutes of your time. You would say, I'm calling. If I only had a chance to call you back to tell you blah blah blah, and that how little things of how you word your sentences and how you word you moves the momentum forward to design, to close that sale. And I even still think that that is something that is incredibly valid now. I mean, I told you when I went to that Brizo event, and I was with a bunch of designers, like 20 designers, and they were like, I wish the brands would give us like a little romance blurb about every product, because sometimes we just want to copy and paste. Like, why am I spending, $1,200 on this faucet versus
Mhm.
like a $400 one I could get at Home Depot? What is
Yeah.
what is different about it that it means that I should be buying a luxury faucet? Now,
Yeah.
designers do know quality of materials, the brand, that maybe they did something very unique with this design. And, I know personally, like, hey, if this is completely all made with stainless steel versus plastic, you know what I mean? Like internally, or, there's how it is internally made is a big deal, and why it costs more money. So those are all things that you can read on the spec sheet, but wouldn't it be nice to have like a little paragraph from every brand on every SKU, copy and paste, that you can put in, or even pulls it into the proposal that would say,
Mm-hmm.
this is why we went with this faucet. This is why we
Mm-hmm.
went with this lamp fixture. This is why we went with this hardware,
Mm-hmm.
and there are so many reasons designers really care about this on a level. And I'll tell you, I even myself, being sort of like a little bit removed from the industry, but not, is when I did like a refresh for my kitchen, and I had a designer help me, and I was getting some drawer pulls, and she showed me a couple of options, and I went with like the less expensive option at first. And we ordered them, we had them come in, and I was like, you know what? They don't feel right. Like, put them on. I didn't like them. I didn't like how and she was selling me that initially. She's like, spend some money on hardware, because like your hand touches it a lot, and like
Yeah.
how it feels in your hand. And I decided to return those and buy the higher end ones. And I love them. And I get compliments on that. You wouldn't think, like, who compliments somebody's like drawer pulls. Like, it's not that big of a
But it
difference.
makes a difference. No, it
But
makes a
I
huge
actually do
difference.
get compliments on them all the time. And when you hold them, it's not like I'm thinking about it when I'm holding it. I'm not thinking about it. And that's the point.
And that's the point of what we do. That's
Yeah,
exactly the point of what we do. We think about all the things that you don't think about,
right,
because the experience should be seamless. It's
right.
sort of like, I liken it to like the experience at Disney. I'm like, I'm like, you've never been bit by a mosquito at Disney World. I'm like, no, I haven't. I'm like, yeah, because there's a system there
Right.
that, I'm like, those things, those little things that they have thought about that you don't think about that make the experience amazing are just like what we as designers do.
That
We
is
think about
exactly
all
that.
those little
I
things.
cannot believe you just said that.
Yeah,
That is what it is right there.
yeah,
It's that
that's exactly it.
that Disney experience where people
That's
can't
what
put
we
their
do.
finger on it, but there's no trash around. There's no
Yeah,
weird smells, no matter where they're
yep,
going. There's no
yep,
mosquitoes, like, and you don't even, and you're literally like in a swamp. So there should be, you know
exactly.
what I
Yeah, it
mean?
should it should be a mess because
Yeah,
you're like you said, you're walking on a swamp, but
right,
it's not. It's
right,
not. It's not. And so because they've taken a bunch of little things that could make it a mess and they've eliminated them and they've created this environment that is utopia, quite frankly.
right.
And so it's like that's what we do.
Yes.
We sit back and we listen and we watch, and we hear all the things you say, but more importantly, we hear the things you don't say. I remember a client telling me, she said it like 10 times, I hate that couch. I hate that couch. And I said to her, and I looked at her and I said, and her husband was like, I know you've been saying it for years. And I turned to her and I said, do you hate that couch or do you hate the color? And like she turned to me, she had like water in her eyes and she was like, oh my God, nobody ever asked me that. I just realized it's the color. I actually don't hate the couch. I don't like red.
Right.
And I was like, because I said, the couch actually fits perfectly in here. Every time I come over here, you're sitting on the chaise part of the couch. Like, so
It's comfortable.
I,
Yeah.
we literally got the same sofa. We just redid it in a different, more neutral fabric,
Wow. Wow.
you know? You know, I remember one client told me, I said, let me see your house. She said, I have, you know, tens of thousands of pictures, and I've had 3 or 4 designers tell me that it's a mess. I said, well, let me just take a look. So I took a look. She said, because it's all different styles. There's no rhyme or reason. So I looked at it. I said, actually, there is everything that you selected, every style, whether it's Rococo or Bauhaus or modern, there's nothing that's askew. Like every room is like orderly. Like everything is on like a rectilinear. Like everything's like sort of. She said, "Oh my God, you're right. I don't like anything that's on the diagonal. Like everything is sort of like this. You know,
Right.
very." And she was like, "You're right. It's that's." I said, "Well, that's the common thread." I said, "So we should work from that." I said, "It's a very small concept, but we'll work from that. We'll make sure that everything is we work from a tailored. We'll work from a tailored look for you.
Right.
You like a very tailored look, and that's what we'll work from, you know." And she was like, "Oh my gosh, you're right." You
Yeah.
know, so that's what we
Yeah.
did. Parsons chairs, you know, very tailored table, and that's how we started the design. You know, but those are the things that we as designers think about that clients don't even realize, you
Right.
know?
It's all those little things. I've told you this before, but like I have when I walked into this house, one of the reasons that I fell in love with this house. I mean, there's a lot I liked about this house, but I love like in the primary bathroom, there is a laundry chute that goes right down to the laundry room. And I
Yes.
to this day love it, love it. And it told like I know it's very selfish of me, but I've like there's also in the hallway, there's another door that goes down to the chute. And when we first moved in here, I let the kids, we all were putting laundry down there. And my kids, when we moved in here, were already teenagers. So I was like, you know what? No, you can walk your butt
Yes.
down there and do the laundry yourself. I'm going to put my laundry basket at the bottom.
That's right.
It's going to be for mom and dad. And that is
That's
it.
right.
And
That's right.
I don't let them use it.
Nice.
I don't let them.
Nice.
They sneak stuff in though. They sneak like a wet bathing suits and stuff that ends up in the downstairs bathroom. They'll shove into my stuff, and I'll end up doing their laundry and putting their room in a sneaky way, like a sweatshirt or something. But for the most part, I have trained them. No, that is something that this is one luxury that I want for myself, but it is a luxury I love. Like I have a habit of doing laundry every Monday. I will, just throw things in there as I'm getting undressed in the bathroom, at night. And so it's like I don't have to think about clothes being anywhere. I don't have a hamper in my bedroom. I don't have
See?
like, clothes all over the place. Like I just throw it in and take it, if it's going to the dry cleaner, I have like a little spot for that. And then I have this spot that's just for the shoot. And those are I just do it at night and I'm not even thinking about it. Brush my teeth, done.
And it's
And
done.
it cut down on that accumulation of laundry that happens in your bedroom that
Yep.
that everybody hates. Like
Yep.
would have like we have laundry hampers, and he would put a bunch of his stuff in the hamper until it was overflowing, and it would drive me nuts, and those kinds of things just don't happen anymore. So I love it.
See, and that little thing that little thing brings so much joy.
It
You
does, and
know,
it's not even a big deal, but it does
but
bring,
it is,
because
but it is a
it's
bit, you know
that
what I mean?
clutter that I don't have to see every day. And you don't
Exactly.
realize how much you don't, it's like a thought that you don't have to be annoyed by. And that
Yep.
cutting down, I think that's another thing that designers do that I think clients are just so unaware of is that, that there's so many annoying things that happen for a person is they navigate their home, and the designer is sitting there like, whack-a-mole trying to whack all of those annoyances down. And so that's that feeling of not, you just don't see it. It's
Yeah.
you've eliminated a stressor in my life that
Yeah.
I didn't even know was really causing me a problem until I don't see it anymore.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
then your day, you're leaving the house, in a much better mood,
sure.
right? Because you're not encountering these things that
And it's
are,
all the time too. It's like, Monday I'm putting clothes away, but let's say Tuesday, I'm not seeing it on the floor on Tuesday morning. I'm
yep.
not seeing it on the floor Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday,
And
Sunday.
granted,
You know,
and the pile's
as
not
the week
growing,
goes
right? Yeah,
on,
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah,
like
yeah. Yep.
I'm getting more and more like not like blow up and have a big fight with my husband, but like it's just an annoyance. It's just an annoyance
Yeah.
that I don't have to live with in my life, you know?
Yep.
And there's a million things like that that are just like little minor annoyances in how a house functions that can be really solved with design, and how designers think about that, and how they approach that, and how they make a client's life so much better. And the other
Hmm.
part of it too, for me, is moving to a house that is really well designed, is that we're like, I call it like, I can't believe I live here feeling. You know what I mean? I'm sure you felt it. Like that day your house is clean, like the housekeeper maybe came or whatever happens.
Yep. Yep.
And it's just like you're like you're at the end of the day and you're about to go sit down and watch some television or hang out with your family, and you have a glass of wine and you're just looking around your house, and you're like, I can't believe I get to live here. I can't believe
Hmm.
that I live
Hmm.
here. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? And
Hmm.
I think that anybody who's lucky to have a designer, that's what they're feeling, is like
Yep.
you get that feeling at the end of it that you just can't believe that this is what, and I'm sure a lot like, having a baby where it's so stressful through the whole process, but at the end it's like that that joy of like, wow, like this is my place. Like this is,
I
all of
tell
us that
clients that
are,
all the time. I'm like,
yeah,
you should be like the goal of this when we're done. There's like several goals. I'm like, but one of the goals is you should be so proud to show this off and so proud to live in it, to envelop yourself in it. Like you should just both things. Like
yeah,
living in it and showing it off should be like your jam,
yes, yeah,
and it should like be the thing that gives you such joy,
yeah,
and you should rest in the fact, I always tell them this too, and rest in the fact that your neighbor can't come over and be like, oh, I know where you got this stuff from.
right.
Because that's the other goal. Like
Yes,
that's why we're
it's
going to
unique to
create
you.
a
It's
design.
unique to
Yeah.
you. That's
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
huge because so many people think it's about furniture and it's about buying things. And it's really like much more space planning, much
Oh,
more
yeah.
understanding how you're living, and that no one can have this collection of things. Like there's products from antique stores. There's, something that you found in Paris at a flea market. There is something that a rug that was handmade, hand knotted, that who a really great rug manufacturer. There's, lighting that was, like handmade too. Like, there's all these little
I mean,
details,
even things
you
that
know?
they own, that
Yeah,
they
even
would,
that they own.
that they would like to work in or not work in. Clients
Sure.
always say to me, I don't want to show you. I'm like, no, please show me your stuff. Please. I
Yeah.
want to see your
Yeah.
stuff. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, this is great. Let's work this in. There's all that, like you said, there's all that stuff that's curated, into the space to
Yeah.
make it, uniquely theirs. Yeah.
Now, do you think that that also comes into play? I feel like you just saying that just like triggered something in my head of like designers who have said that they don't want work shown sometimes too. Like they're like, oh, I don't want to share that project because I didn't really like that project, or I didn't, I didn't like that how that turned out, and I kind of
Yeah.
am always like, reluctant to have them do that too. Maybe it's not for your website, but that's social media, you know, uh
I don't so
content.
I've had those projects. I just have not. So the projects in the past that I've had that I'm like, I don't want to. I just didn't photograph.
You just didn't photograph.
Mm-mm.
Even any aspect of it, you couldn't have photographed like little bits of
N-
it that you liked.
No, and what's funny, I'm so glad you said that because what's funny because a colleague of mine was like, I always photograph every project because there's always something in the room. There's
Yeah.
always something in the room that I can get. And so I've learned from that. I've learned from that. And so now what I do on site is I practice with my phone
Yes.
like
Yeah.
as the room's being built, and I'm like, hmm, do I love the whole room or are there moments in the room that I love? So
Right.
that way, when I get the professional photographer to come on site, I can say to them, you know what, this is not a whole room situation. This is just a moment. And I would love to get this moment and this moment and this moment. Or
Right.
I would love to just get the whole room. And so
Right.
I've really learned from that. But I was a serial um either all or nothing designer, like at the end. And I would stand back and look at the room and be like, eh, I don't love it and move on.
Yeah, yeah. And I
Yeah.
I think it's really good to do that. And I think I'll say from a business perspective, because I always think in terms of marketing websites. That's my jam. So um, I think that from a business perspective too, you should know that the client doesn't really care, you know, if that was one cohesive project or not. So it's entirely possible for you to take moments from a couple of different projects
Yep. Yep.
and read them in a story on your website like it was one project,
Yeah.
because it's just part of your sales. You know what I mean? And I think designers get hung up on like, no, I've got to be, I mean, and you should be truthful in marketing. It's not like you have to lie per se, but you can lie by omission a little bit and saying like, we did this, for our client, we did this, this, and this, and this, and then we did this, this, and this, and this. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to spell out that it's two different clients.
That's right.
So sometimes, and even the project itself, if the project was in, let's just say where I live here, it's in the east end of Manchester, and you really wanted it to be in the north end because you want to do more north end work, you can say it's in the north end on your website. No one cares.
Right. 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 Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
No one cares.
Right.
Nobody's coming to your website police and saying, oh, you lied, that project's not in that neighborhood
That's
that you
yeah,
said
yeah,
it
yeah.
was,
I Googled that. That's not really there. Yeah, 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 yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
it doesn't matter. It doesn't
yeah.
matter. As long as the gist of it, you're talking about, something that is, it's marketing, and taking a little bit of creative license to that to help your marketing or to tell the story that you want to tell or to get the clients that you want to get. And because that's ultimately at the end of the day, every single person who's looking at that product isn't thinking this project is good or bad. They're thinking, is this a picture of this going to get me the next client or not?
Yes.
That's the calculation that they're making in their head. So
And
how
honestly,
can you,
I've had clients that have said to me, like I went on your website, there was nothing on your website that style wise spoke to me. And I was like, well, then why did you hire me? And she was like, because I knew that because of the diversity in your work, I knew that then you could nail my style.
right?
And I was like, oh, that's interesting. She
Yeah.
said, even though nothing, on your website was my style, I knew that you would be able to nail my style because you had a diverse range of styles. And I was like, oh, all right.
Yeah. You never
So
know
it
what
just goes to show
they're
you,
looking at. Yeah.
put it all up, because
Right.
if you only put the one project up or two projects up that are very similar, you could be, Xing yourself out from something that could be great.
Right. And I
You
will
never
say get
know.
all the content you can while you have it, because you only have that limited amount of time to get the content. And you never know, like it might be an emotionally charged decision too, to say, I don't want this photographed as a room because you're angry about some aspect of it.
Yep. Oh
Things
yeah.
didn't go the way you wanted to go,
Oh
and
yeah.
a contract, it's such an emotional time at
Hmm.
that end of the project. Like all the budget's been spent or more than that's spent, like years have been put into this. There's it's good and bad, but there's a lot of emotional aspect to it that I think that you're not 100% thinking clearly either.
No. No.
So, it's just like that separation that the client feels from you. And maybe that's good, maybe that's bad, depending on how that relationship worked itself out the 2 years. But everybody is sort of at a, you know, at a moment that they're feeling some emotion. So it's not really the right time to make a decision about whether or not you want a photograph or not. I would say my advice is you're paying for the photographer, get all the shots, get all the
Yeah.
content, get the
Yeah.
content while you're doing it too. Like if you're coming in to look
Because you
at
can always
something,
zoom in on a moment.
yeah, you can always zoom in.
You
You're
can't
coming,
zoom out. Yeah.
no. And so you can check on, whether the floors have been laid. Make a little video of that. Throw some music on in the background. That is progress shots,
Yeah. Yeah.
see that you're working, that like do a couple of them, just little 30-second, 1 minute, showing something how it's done, showing how I had a designer the other day who was filming like how they were setting the temperature of the lights, like simple thing, but it's like it shows that you care about something
And it
as
speaks to
simple.
the level of detail that goes into
Yeah, yeah,
each
yeah.
project. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you're
Yeah. Yeah.
telling
Yeah.
that story because I can say one of the complaints we've heard is like, oh, the associations don't do enough to educate the public about what design really is. I hear that a lot from as a complaint from designers. And I just think like, well,
Well, the
maybe,
onus to me,
maybe.
from my opinion, and this is, I'm probably going to get in trouble for this opinion. The onus is on us.
I think so too.
The onus is on us. I don't think I would never put my narrative in someone else's hands. I just
Right,
wouldn't.
right,
So and because every designer does other, we all work differently, right? I think there's a bar, right? That sort of generalizes how we work. But the onus is on me to educate the client on what the design process is and what is fact and what is fiction. I mean, I remember, a client, I think I told you, a client saying to me, I wanted an HGTV experience. And I think I was telling you like what I said, and you enlightened me saying, well, this is probably a better way to have handled that because you weren't thinking about really what she wanted, like what she was actually saying to you. And I remember thinking back about that. I'm like, yeah, you know what? Because I don't think I ever really talked about the experience. And so her assuming that she would get an HGTV experience is based on the fact that I never educated her on the process. And
right.
so I think the onus is on us. We have otherwise someone else is going to tell them how we work. And
Yes,
therefore, in her case, it was HGTV,
right.
right? It's not a bad thing. It's just it's what it is, and
It's
what
just
was
a misconception. It's
yeah, it's what
everybody
was
has
available to her.
misconceptions
That
all the time. Yeah,
Yeah, that's the resource she had.
yeah,
Oh, designers on TV. I have a designer in real life. It must be the same thing. You know what
right,
I'm saying?
right, right.
So yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
it's hard because it sometimes is that go-to feeling of it being insulted. You know what I mean? Like it's
Yeah,
a little bit go-to like, listen, respect me. And that's fair because I think that designers struggle with that preconception all the time and then they don't feel like they are respected. But I think that a lot of times, like I see designers on social media all the time. I mean, I built up a lot of interior design community on Instagram. And I follow a lot of designers. I've seen a lot of designers making posts, and I can tell you that overwhelmingly, very few of them make posts that show the process that make like this is what I'm doing. This is what I'm deciding to do in a day to day. Like
yeah,
they might show a mood board like physical mood board or even a digital mood board. They might show, but do they show the audio that goes along with this of like, this is what I'm thinking. This is why this is complicated right now. He really loves orange. She hates orange. So I'm trying to come up with something where we can work in things that he really likes, but also respect what she really likes and give them a cohesive color plan for this space. And I've got this is how I'm doing this.
yeah.
But these are my backups just in case this doesn't work. And these are the things that I'm thinking. And I've
Because
never one time seen that.
I think the dichotomy of that is, I think the dichotomy of that there's a that's a complex issue. Number one, I think, and I told you this before, I think that as creatives, design it is not something that is separated from us, right? So do you like the design? Do you like me?
Right.
I don't care. A designer can tell you that that's not true, but it is. It's our art is an extension of us, right? So are you a fan of my work? Are you a fan of me? And if you reject my work, you're rejecting me, right?
Right.
In
Right.
some small way. So there's that. And then I also think that we on some level are judged on the finished work, right? So a client will make the decision to call or not call, to hire or not hire based on our portfolio of work, which is our finished work. And so we get in the mindset of only showing, you know, the finished work, never pulling back that curtain. And I think we get programmed to just, even with each other,
Right.
even with each other, to just, say fate, like, only give this sort of, you know, showy thing. And I think that connection happens and education happens and real moments happen when you do pull the curtain back a little
Yeah,
bit and
I think
say,
so too. And I think that's the most
this is
interesting
where,
thing. You're
I mean,
teaching,
and I know that for sure. Like I look back at my Instagram posts, the ones that have done the best are the ones where I've said, look, oh my God, it's 3 in the morning. I'm still up. I'm working on this. Like I was in like a white t-shirt. I mean, or like I'm looking at wallpaper samples and they're very far and few between because I don't do them a lot. I
right?
have to be delirious to do one.
Right.
But when I've done them, they've
They
done the
resonate.
best.
They
Yeah,
resonate
they
with
resonate.
people
You're right.
because
Yeah,
that's what people are interested in. I find myself, I like the posts where someone is talking about something real. The pictures are great. But there's so many great pictures right now. Like
that's
there's so many
true.
great pictures.
That's true.
And I can flip through any magazine and there's just a million great pictures. Beautiful, 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 beautiful. But there's very few people talking about all the steps that go on to get there. Like, and then if a complaint is that clients are uneducated, imagine if like just the people listening to this podcast right now were like, you know what? I've been struggling with my social media. I'm going to make some changes. I'm going to do this. I'm going to start educating. I'm going to start using my Instagram to talk to my client. And I'm really going to say that, I'm going to teach them everything that they ask. If anytime a client asks you something, that should be an Instagram post.
Mm.
So if you write them down, even in a notes app on your phone, whatever, and you can just speak to the camera, you can show and tell, you could be like, this is why I do it this way, from whatever standpoint on any kind of product that you can. This is why I'm doing it this way. I'm railroading the fabric because you see the length of this couch and this seam where it would be, and this is why I'm doing it this way. It's going to use a little bit more fabric, and I know that's going to cost a little bit more for my client, but at the end of the day, they're not going to see these seams in the front of you know, the sofa, things like that. And you've got it and you're like showing them, this is why I do it this way versus see how, if I do it this way, it's going to have seams right here.
Hmm.
They don't know that. They don't know, that but like, these are a million things like this that you think about and you're handling behind the scenes. They don't even know you're handling
They
behind.
don't even know. Yep.
And then they see the bill and they're like, why did this take so long? Why did this take so long, Nile? I mean, I don't understand. Why did that take 10 hours for you to do?
Yep.
Because
Yep.
I had to decide to give you the least amount of seams and I had to calculate the price of that to figure that out. And then I had to look at it and I had to know where the pattern was and where it would fit onto the sofa so that if I put it this way and then it, like the flower is not in the middle or whatever, there's a million things like this in a day to
Yeah,
day.
and it's so true because there's a moment in million dollar decorators from years ago, that show, right?
Yeah,
Where Kathy Ireland walks into, I forget who the client was the heir to Max Factor or something like that. And she makes this statement and she says, I have a law degree, I have an MBA, and I thought that design, I thought I could do this. I thought do this as in design.
right,
And I realized I can't. And I took such offense to that statement. I was so angry. And I was like, if I knew Kathy, how would I call her up and say, I can't believe she said that to you? Because I'm like, how dare you think that just because you went to law school, you have your MBA, that you could tackle our profession? No, you can't. It is a profession and it's hard. It's a lot of work. And just like, law takes thought and you care, so does interior design. It
right.
takes a lot of work
It
and,
does.
there's an investment in thought there. So yeah, I think it is important to share those moments and to peel back the curtain just a little bit.
I
It's
think it
just
more than a
hard to
little bit.
do it.
I think more than a little bit. I think the more vulnerable we get is as a community, the more vulnerable we get in sharing those moments, the more if we just did it in a radical way,
Yeah.
where every designer would be like, you know what, every third image is going to be an education image, an education post where I'm going to teach them about something that I do behind the scenes.
Yeah,
Then think about in 5 years how educated the public would be about what design is.
that's true.
Think about it, because like every person who follows one designer or two designers or three designers would be learning, three or four things about design every month. You know what I
No,
mean?
you're right. I mean, when I posted something, I forget what it was about. There was a few years ago, I posted something about the process, and it was in a roundup. It was in a funny way, but I in my DMs, somebody reached out to me and said, "Thank you. I'm working with a designer now in Virginia. I think it was Virginia, and I realized that I have not been allowing her to, run
I
the
get that a lot
process.
too. You know, I get, just so you know,
Thank you.
this is something people don't know about interior design community. I regularly get posts from clients. I don't think a ton of them follow me. It's very much because I go through and I get a lot, mostly designers, like, but I will get a post, I'd say on once a month, that is like, you're teaching me how to treat my designer. Like I'm learning so much about what I really respect the profession and I really want to do a good job being a good client. And I'm learning a lot about what not to do to
Yeah,
not be a
see,
good client.
that's
And I even
amazing.
had someone recently that was like, what is a budget for, I'm buying a house with my husband and what is a budget for a designer? Because I don't even want to start to do anything until I can afford to hire a designer. What would that cost so that I can build that in before I even start? And so, in the ways that we're doing this, I mean, you'd think that, and sometimes maybe the designer, a client that follows us maybe is put off because sometimes we do jokes about clients. Sometimes we do like questions that are about how to deal with clients. But at the end of the day, it also is educating those people too.
Yeah,
It's educating everyone. This is how you handle these situations. And I hope some people realize like some of this is to be taken with a grain of salt. Like
yeah,
a lot of
absolutely.
times, like somebody's like, just fire that client. And I'm always like, oh, I wish they wouldn't just always go to fire the client because I feel like I work with a lot of difficult people. Designers aren't easy to work with, always. So I actually am like working with sometimes difficult people. I think that creative people can be difficult and creative people are very interesting. So I enjoy working with people that have a variety of different personalities. And I think that with clients, it can be that way too, but it's like, how do you work with a difficult client? And
Yeah,
to be fair, there are some that you shouldn't work with no matter what.
yeah,
But as far as a red flag is concerned, like in the very beginning and someone coming in and doing something slightly disrespectful, maybe,
yeah.
it's not always cut bait and run. Sometimes it's like they just don't understand they don't understand design and they don't understand the process. So how can you educate them clearly and without emotion that this is how it's done?
I just I will say, one of my best clients, my favorite clients, and soon to be a return client again, said this to a prospect. She was doing a referral for me, and she just said, I Nile does best when you let him do his thing. You let him handle everything. And I believe in expertise. And the client said, what do you mean? She said, I believe in expertise. I don't tell my doctor how to do his job. I would never tell an attorney. She said, she's a judge now. She said, but when I was an attorney, I didn't want to be told how to write a legal brief. I I don't tell now how to do his job. He's the expert. I believe in letting experts do their job. And that didn't mean that she said the only thing I hate the only things I hate in my house are the things that I told him to change. That didn't mean that she gave me carte blanche and I ran all over her. No, she had a budget. She had a firm timeline. I knew what she expected. I knew where I could push and where I couldn't push. But I also felt empowered and respected, and I felt that she honored and respected my expertise, right? And she
Yes.
really took what I had to say. And so
Yeah.
I think that for most of us is where we butt heads with clients, because when you get to a place where the client is just not respecting the way that you work to give them the best possible outcome, it's like, well, what do you want from me? Like,
Right.
why am I here?
Why am I here?
Why
Yeah.
am I here?
Yeah.
Because you hired me, and we can't move forward you don't let me move
Right,
forward.
right. Just respect me, God damn it.
Yes, exactly.
Well, I think that's a good point to end on because we really do want you guys to walk away with some just like some real solid thoughts. So I'm just going to kind of go over. I really do think that you should share more of your work. I think that
Yes,
if you're going to give something away for free, you should make sure you're putting it on an invoice so they know what they're getting for free and
yes,
explaining your process more so that they understand from the very beginning what it is you do so that you feel like you are respected for the amount of time that you're investing. And you're always going to have some lost money on the table because you just care so much. And I know that. I mean, we feel it. We want you to know that we get that about what you're feeling right now. And sometimes that
yep,
makes you feel like you're not worth as much too. It can really do something to your self-esteem to be working for free, to care more than your clients sometimes. And I want you to feel heard on that. And but at the same time, I think that you have to empower yourself to write it
and there
down.
are ways to
Yeah.
address that without doing it for free. Go
Yes.
to your local showroom, take things out on approval,
Yes.
stage, you get the pictures and see if your client likes them. Maybe they'll buy them. If not, return them.
Right.
Do
Right.
that. Do
Right.
those things.
Do those little things so that you are not feeling like you're being taken advantage of at the end of
Exactly.
and that you feel like you made a profit. And also like pay attention to those things because do a forensic accounting of the project so that you do know you are making a profit. Because you sometimes maybe you do need to adjust your pricing so that you feel
Mhm.
like you're getting what you need to get out of this job and you're making the salary that you need to make. You know what you need to make every day to put food on the table, to pay your mortgage. Come up with a salary for yourself and work yourself backwards and say, this is what I need to make. And then you know that this project is not going to pay your bills and you can't take that project. You have to work on a different project. So those are things that you can do too. And then just take the emotion out of it as much. Like if they say something that is so, um, maybe feels like not respecting you. Try to take the ego out of it a little bit and just clearly this is what I do. This is how I do it and reiterate that and go forward. Face it. Face it right away instead of letting
Mhm.
that resentment build up inside you too. I think
Mhm.
that's a big part of it so that you can be happy. You can like
Yes.
you can do something
Exactly.
and love your job the way we want you to love your job. So I hope you have a wonderful day and you come back to listen to the trade. Bye, Nile.
Bye.